again, friends, and you are my friends, and welcome to another action-packed episode of 605, the Superpodcast, the only podcast on Turner Time. I am the great Brian Last, and as always, I am joined by David Bixenspan. Bix, how are you today?
I'm doing especially well today. How are you?
Especially well. You know, let's get right to that here at the top of the show. Bix, by the time this show drops, you have something really, really special, really, really big, something you've been teasing forever, it seems, coming out, or will be out, actually, when this show airs. So why don't you tell the listeners all about it? Okay,
so the fully, it's not actually published or formatted yet. We're recording this, literally right before it goes up. At SBNation.com as part of their SB Nation long-form series, SBNation.com/longform as one word. I have an article, over 6,000 words, about the Big Show's attempt at starting a boxing career between WWE runs in 2007.
Oh, man. How long had you been working on this? For a while, haven't you?
Yes. I mean, we said it. When did we make the deal for the article? Probably since, I've probably actually been working on it since November, maybe? And, before that, I'd been researching and all that. So, in your research, what interesting stuff did you find that hadn't already been out there? None of it had really been out there. There was the only stuff you can really find about this in the first place until this came out were a couple things about Big Show buying a house in Miami because he was starting a boxing career. And then when there was the lawsuit over everything that happened a couple years later, and that's about it.
Yeah. Well, you've been doing so much work, and really exceptional work, I think. Maybe some of the best wrestling journalism in a long time, covering the Hulk Hogan Gawker trial and case. Did any of the things that came out of that lend itself to your research for this? Because obviously Hogan is a central figure in the Big Show boxing debacle, as it were.
Yeah. One thing for anyone who hasn't read it yet, it's not about the lawsuit. It's about the boxing endeavor itself, just using things that came from the lawsuit, like deposition testimony and stuff. So it's not it's not as, what's the best word to use? Nuts and bolts or whatever, as the Hogan coverage and stuff has been. It's more like, I guess, what would the best comparison be? I guess like the Warrior article I did for Fighting Spirit?
Yeah, I guess that would be a good comparison.
Yeah, and I guess the thing that would connect the two cases, besides Hogan himself, is that the backer for all of this was Cecil Barker of Sobe Entertainment, who is the black billionaire from the Hogan racist rant or whatever.
That's right. That's right.
So that kind of, that makes the whole craziness of this, I feel like, bigger. Because you have just the whole idea of it, and then, his son was dating Hogan's daughter, but Hogan didn't know, and then that ties into everything else, and, as people see in the article, he spent $10 million on various Hogan business ideas. Not sure if that included this or not, or if there was, another couple million or more on top of that, but quite the... there's a lot from him, because it's just the way it ended up working out, especially with Big Show as the central character of the article. There was so much more from Cecil Barker that I wanted to include, but there just wasn't really a place for it. I'm trying to remember if I showed you one of my earlier drafts. There's a thing where they're asking him if he thought after the boxing thing ended, because he was suing with the idea that there was a contract that was still valid that would have covered wrestling too, and Jerry McDivitt's asked him if he thinks he can put something on the size of WrestleMania, and he's like, "Well, you don't think I can, but I can." I've done I'd have to look up the quote, but it was something about I've landed spacecrafts on planets.
Well, real quick, Bix, just because there probably is a segment of our audience who have no idea this ever took place. Well, so just give the overall story of what the Big Show's boxing career or, attempted career was, if you could sum it up. Okay,
so the very brief gist of this, and, we'll move on in a second because I don't want to give away the whole thing. Not that I really could since it's long. But So, as people may remember, Big Show was, in every sense of the word, not in very good shape when he left WWE in 2006. A lot of injuries. He had gained a lot of weight. And Hogan had suggested to him, for some reason, that he take up boxing. And Barker was willing to fund the whole thing, and he trained for a while, lost a lot of weight, and then things happened that I won't spoil, and he gave up on it and went back to WWE. And the rest is in the article.
Yeah, well, everyone, go out of your way to read this. Bix has really worked hard on it and did a great job. I was fortunate enough to be able to read some of the early drafts and see the work he was doing. And again, it's at sbnation.com/longform. Is that what it is, Bix?
Yeah, and it'll probably, also be linked on, some of the other SB Nation sites. And I don't know if it goes on their main page or anything, but it'll probably show up in some form on, Cage Side Seats and some of the other sites. And also, it'll be on my Twitter and everything. But yeah, sbnation.com/longform.
Who's going to be the angriest at you after this article comes out?
I don't think WWE comes off badly in it in any way, though. So I wouldn't say WWE. Big Show, maybe. I feel like it really paints Hogan more negatively than anyone else. Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I mean,
and not that I'm consciously not that I'm consciously doing it, but because I just kind of really kept everything down to what would tell the story best, but. I mean, Big Show comes off a little naive, but someone who recognizes that he was, in hindsight. You know what I mean? So I don't think anyone really comes off I don't think he comes off especially bad. I think it's really more the Hogan and Barker side that comes off worse than anyone else.
Yeah, I would agree. So everyone out there, support Bix, sbnation.com/longform, and I'm sure it'll be all over the internet before you know it.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'd kind of be shocked if it's not.
And while we're talking about plugs and getting this out of the way first thing in the show, I will, by the time this show airs, actually the same day, I'll be doing double duty, as not only will I be here on my 6:05 regular appearance with Bix, but I will be on the Jim Cornette Experience as his anger management therapist. Jim has made that's what he's calling it. He's made a commitment for this year to try to have more fun with the show and be a little more positive. And he, and this was really nice to hear, received such wonderful feedback after appearing on our show. So many people said that we really would like to hear more of you talking about old wrestling and having fun talking about wrestling. And he decided to have me on, and that's what we did. We talked about old wrestling, and actually, if you're a listener of this show, a regular listener, you were kind of rewarded because we talk about things that we talk about on the show. We follow up about the fake Stan Lane, about the Hangman Bruce Poe bands. We talk about Dandy Jack Donovan and Mario Galento, Dennis Coralluzzo with the story about Dave Baumkratz, the 35-year-old kid fan being sent in the room to bring cokes to Shane McMahon. We get Jim Cornette's perspective on that tale. So it's a lot of the things we regularly talk about here on the show. And it was a lot of fun. So you can check that out, Jim Cornette Experience at mlwradio.com. It's on iTunes. And I will actually be on again next week as well. So listen to both shows. Now you have a double duty on Thursdays. Listen to us first and then listen to the Jim Cornette Experience. And like I said, it was a lot of fun, and I really had a good time doing it, and I look forward to doing it again.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing it. Just from what you've told me, we also get Jim's side of the whole thing with the fake Stan Lane.
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
That should be interesting. I'm curious if he has any extra insight into that, because like of all those stories that we talked about last week, at least of the guys who pretended to be actual people, I think that one's the most interesting just because of the whole, like, the way it ends with the family selling merchandise at the funeral.
Right. I asked about that because, first of all, it turns out, according to Jim, the guy looked nothing like Stan Lane.
Oh, of course.
So I said, at the funeral, when they're selling, 8x10s of the fabulous ones, is it the fabulous ones or is it Steve Kerr and some airbrushed in guy, who looks like, but Jim wasn't sure. But the idea that they had a merch stand at the funeral is my favorite thing. I'm trying to think, are there any other wrestling funeral shenanigans? I guess the only other one I could think of was when, well, I shouldn't say the only one. There was Bob Backlund yelling during the Vern Gagne funeral a few months back. And then there was Dr. Mike Lano sneaking a camera in to take photos of Louis Spicoli's coffin at the Louis Spicoli funeral, which got him heat from everyone.
Especially Stefan De Leon, who had to be held back from assaulting him at the funeral.
I never heard that.
Yes.
Really? Wow.
I mean, I've heard that. I believe Mike at one point said that he did not, but that he tried. I think he said he actually did. Like, did he
had multiple? He had multiple.
He said he put photos of 2 dead wrestlers in the casket or something.
He had multiple stories about what happened. You know, one of the stories on a video that I put out there once was he said that he was just shooting the flowers outside of the funeral. So I mean, you never know with him. And then the other one I could think of, I guess, was after Bruiser Brody was murdered. Didn't the Japanese wrestling magazines actually put a picture of his open casket?
I mean, that's a thing they did with somewhat regularity. Like if that was that's one of those cultural things. I mean, kind of like Mexico.
Yeah.
I mean, Mexico. I mean, that's what they do. Like, you know, I remember there were photos of Antonio Peña's, you know, funeral with the open casket and stuff. So, I mean, that's one of those weird cultural things, I guess. I'm trying to feel like I'm forgetting something else. I mean,
I heard Dr. Mike Lano went to Antonio Peña's funeral and put cocaine and ecstasy.
No, that's terrible.
Yeah, it's also probably true.
What? No, it's not.
Just kidding, everyone. Just kidding.
We love Dr. Mike Lano.
Yeah, he's a funny man.
I guess, I mean, it's not technically at the funeral, but there's the whole Brett Vince thing from Owens, the day of Owens' funeral.
That's right. I mean, all the wrestlers, even Hogan, were up there for Owens' funeral. And then Vince, I guess, correct me where I'm wrong, Bix, Vince didn't feel comfortable going to the funeral. So instead, he met Brett in like an open area because he was afraid of being assassinated. I
think he still went to the funeral, but no, he did go to the funeral, but they met in a park, and Brett later talked to a cop or an off-duty cop, you know, something like that, someone who had been like an off-duty cop or a former cop who had been hired to do security for Vince. For that, apparently there was like a sniper in case Brett tried to kill him. Like, I may be remembering it wrong because that sounds a little much, but something like that. And, you know, there were the different sides of it. Like, Brett had been told not to talk about Owen by the lawyer, and I think said something to even told Vince that. And then when Vince was talking about it, like in the Canadian media, he was like, he wouldn't even talk about Owen. He was just talking about himself, and, you know, that type of thing. I feel like I'm forgetting some kind of other funeral thing. They
didn't do anything with David Von Erich in Japan, did they? I mean, obviously that's probably the biggest ever wrestling funeral, just in terms of not only the wrestlers there, but the overflowing crowd.
Yeah, I mean, it would be that and Owen, I would think.
Yeah,
and,
I mean, well, in terms of people, though, I think David Von Erich was probably the biggest in terms of actual people attending and outside. I mean, you ever see any of the news footage of that? It is just swarmed like you know, a dignitary had passed away. And, you know, Dave Meltzer has always told the story that when David Von Erich died, he was working at a newspaper in Texas, and the sports editor wanted nothing to do with the story, just thought it was silly wrestling stuff. And when he realized how big it was, they ended up having to do a lot of work on it because it was such a big, massive deal.
It was something like they ended up making it a front page story, but after a few days, I think.
Yeah.
I remember, like, I think it was Dave said that, like, he went to the mall, like, the day he died or the day after, whatever, you know. And
where do you think he went? Forever 21? Justice?
Did Forever 21 exist 32 years ago?
I don't know.
And that it was just depressed teenagers, girls sobbing, like, everywhere. Like, just nothing you'd ever seen before in your life. And
you know, it's very upsetting when you realize that now Mike Von Erich's really going to be pushed down your throat.
What?
I meant in terms of being booked, not any sort of sexual.
Oh, then. Yeah. Well, the way you said really, too. I just wasn't.
It's interesting, though, because, the story obviously has always been that David Von Erich goes out to Ribera Steakhouse, passes away that night, is discovered the next day by Bill Irwin. Bruiser Brody's in the room and flushes whatever pills. Placidol down the toilet. And I think, it's one of those things where enough people have said that he really did have his stomach ailment and he really had been sick that really needs to be taken into account. But the story always was that it was a drug overdose just because the pills were in there and flushed down the toilet. So, and I'm sure the combination of the two is, what really happened. But, I was thinking about this recently. So this happens and Giant Baba really goes out of his way to get the body home and he arranges everything because he's so connected over there in Japan. And, a few months later, Kerry loses the NWA title for Giant Baba, All Japan Pro Wrestling in Japan. And then, like, a year later, the Von Erichs cut ties with All Japan and go to New Japan after this long history between Fritz Von Erich and Giant Baba. And was that just because Bruiser Brody was now with New Japan, or what was the reason for, considering how much he had done for them to cut bait?
I think it was just a straight up money thing because they had lost the WWF and they needed. New Japan made a really good offer and Fritz was willing to do it. And I think Dave's talked about how, I know it was him that when he went to Japan, I think it was the first time after all that went down, everyone was like, I can't believe that Fritz would do that after everything Baba did for him, with the implication, being a lot of that having to do with David. And I'm just trying to think, as far as him being sick and having some kind of, intestinal disorder, it seems like that's true. And lately Dave has been making a point to mention that explicitly and give more credence to the idea that was a major contributing cause to his death.
Right. And for years it wasn't that. For years it was just drug overdose. Yeah,
he's been inching towards it over the years. The first time I remember him mentioning it was, I think, when Heroes of World Class came out and he did that huge feature.
Yeah.
And he talks about how, I think he said he was at David's last match live and he did look like deathly ill. And he's said that if you look at his last TV match, that he looks ill. And I've even seen people say that, what was it? Oh, that enteritis, which is, I think that's what it was that they said officially, like acute enteritis.
That's right.
That can actually maybe make the effects of, the alcohol and whatever pills he might have taken more potent. So these days, I'm sure it was some kind of mixed, maybe he didn't outright overdose. Maybe he was drowsy enough that he couldn't, something like that where, cause it was, Bill Irwin on WWE's World Class DVD that suggested, did you ever see that one? The WWE one?
Yes.
Bill Irwin suggested that Dave Von Erich was bulimic.
That's right. Oh, I forgot about that.
And that tied into it, and that he probably forgot how many pills he took. It was very strange.
Plus, he had just eaten a belly full of steak at the steakhouse. I always figured what happened was, Bruiser Brody, it's well known, was one of Dave's sources and Dave's friends, quite honestly. And he said to him, I went into the room and I flushed the drugs down the toilet. And then Dave just ran with that as being the only reason for.
But wrestlers do that anyway. If you're gonna, even if that's not what caused it, you're gonna want to get rid of that stuff.
Right. If it had been in New York, it would have been Mr. Fuji and Don Morocco running into the room.
Yeah. Well, as we've heard recently,
as has come up recently with the Jimmy Snuka case.
Well, I don't know about. I don't think it was necessarily Morocco. I think it was Dave. Just said that that was Fuji stop.
Yeah.
And how did we get on funeral? Oh, Fake Stan Lane.
Fake Stan Lane led to real funerals. But a couple quick follow-ups.
Well, it was a real funeral.
It was a real funeral. A couple of quick follow-ups from last week's action-packed episode. The Hangman, Bruce Probans. We jokingly said that we should get him on the show and interview him. We haven't accomplished that just yet. I did try to find out a little bit more about the man, and I saw he has a Facebook page. And on the page, he says that he's undergoing chemotherapy. And that definitely made me take a step back. Like, oh, maybe we shouldn't mess with him too much.
I mean, if that's a shoot, obviously we hope he gets better.
Bruce, hang in there. And the other thing I found out was he is apparently a competitive eater.
Yeah, I had forgotten about that. That he's participated in some kind of eating competitions. I'm guessing that he's not on the level of, say, an Italian stallion as a competitive eater. The world's fastest. What was it? He wasn't the world spaghetti eating champion. He was the world's fastest spaghetti eater or something.
Yeah.
Unless that's the same thing. Unless competitive spaghetti eating is all about speed.
Do you think in the competitive eating circles that he also tells, oh, I beat Joey Chestnut for the championship at Nathan's? Do you think does he lie in that world the same way he does in the professional wrestling world?
I went to Japan and I trained Kobayashi in the dojos.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll keep on top of this story and see what we can do about it. And then the other one, and this is one I'm just more and more intrigued by, Mark Galeen. We talked about last week his promo, and at some point we may just have to play it on the air.
And to be clear, Mark Galeen, as a reminder, is an actual trained professional wrestler.
Yes, he's an actual trained professional wrestler, not a fake wrestler. And he does this interview with this Shakespearean accent. By what we assume is Jerry
Jarrett's
Jarrett's
what you call it, right?
Yeah, that's what I think.
At the very least, it's very theater-ish.
Very, very theater-ish. And he does this interview talking about bringing in T.J. Khan the Great, and the interview is just hilarious. Pack your bags, Bill Dundee. And,
what is it that he said about Billy Joe Travis?
I don't know.
It was along those lines. It was like, pack your bags, Bill Dundee. See you later, Billy Joe Travis. It was something better than that, though.
Yeah, it was something better than that. And then he talks about T.J. Khan, and then the second promo, T.J. Khan jumps out of a lake and runs what I think Mark Galeen said he could run the 40-meter dash in
40-yard dash.
40-yard dash in 3.5 seconds.
You think your football players are great athletes? Ha! He will pick his teeth with their bones.
But the best part of that interview is surely the end. He does this amazing interview in his Shakespearean accent, building up T.J. Khan the Great, to the point where you actually may want to see T.J. Khan. And then he goes, but I have someone else coming here. He will make Kamala pale. And he just goes...
Yeah, I'm not sure if that was the best choice of words.
No, but it ends with him saying he's bringing in Yo Mamba, the Jungle Savage. And on that note, it cuts.
Yes.
And I looked everywhere. I couldn't find any footage of Yo Mamba, the Jungle Savage.
He was gone in like a week. There's one result on Jason Campbell's site from the Mid-South Coliseum where I think it was him and T.J. Khan against the Rockers, right?
Yeah, I mean, Mark Galeen himself was kind of in and out in that manager role pretty quick. He was there for maybe 2 months because he was there he did the promos, and then he was with T.J. Khan, and then he was quickly sent to lead the Rockers heel turn, and then he was just gone.
And then eventually, now, did he wrestle anywhere else, or was he not seen until he came back as the Beast?
Well, what I was going to say is I listened to, someone was nice enough to send us, he had been on Terry Sims's podcast.
His tag team partner in Beauty and the Beast.
In Beauty and the Beast, and he was on the podcast, so it was the first time I actually got to hear him, and, I didn't realize he's a well-known session drummer in Nashville.
Really?
Yeah, he had played with a bunch of big names.
Oh, that's right. Oh, I totally forgot. You've seen the Jeff Jarrett, Dutch Mantell orchestra thing, right?
Yes.
He's the drummer in that.
Really?
He's the drummer that gets beat up, and the kid does he get hit on the head with the drum? But yeah, I remember he's in the credits.
Oh, I didn't know that. Wow.
So he's a legit drummer. That's right. I did know that. So I didn't know the session musician part, but I knew he was a legitimate drummer.
Yeah, so he was a legitimate drummer, and on the podcast with Terry Sims, he talks about, he was a little older than everyone else when he went to wrestling training school, and him and Terry Sims talked about working for Nick Goulas, not separate from Jarrett. So it makes me think that he may have been working whatever small shows Nick Goulas was running at the time. He made him sound like he was quite senile at the time, so it must have been, really at the end of Nick Goulas. So I'm guessing that maybe he was working there in between, before and after.
I guess so, yeah. And he was from like you said, he was a session musician in Nashville, and he trained at Bill Dundee's school like Terry Sims did, like Todd Morton. Who else was there? What was the job guy with the big hair? Sean Baxter, was that his name?
I don't remember, but those Todd Morton.
You remember?
And
You know who I'm
Sims-
talking about, though. The guy with the big hair.
I don't.
The guy with like the hairband hair.
I don't.
I'll look it up as we keep going. So,
but yeah, those were the three students he named, though. Himself, Todd Morton, and Terry Sims. And yeah, it's a fun interview, and he talks about his time teaming with Terry Sims and some really fun stories. But he doesn't touch at all upon being the manager of T.J. Khan and that whole little time period where he cuts those amazing promos, which we will absolutely be playing on the air pretty soon. I want to try to find a way to get him on the show and talk to him just about managing T.J. Khan and cutting those promos. So we got to, Bix, you're friends with Terry Sims. You need to put this together.
I guess I will. And yes, Sean Baxter is who I was thinking of.
Sean Baxter. Not Brandon Baxter, who also had 80s hair back then, and now he's bald, but Sean Baxter.
His hair just fell out from the bleaching.
Was that what it did? Yeah. I guess.
Yep. I mean, well, did he ever really have 80s hair, though?
I used to hate him on Global when he was just a kid, like doing
the teen beat.
Oh, and I'll see you at ringside.
My favorite thing about those teen beats was sometimes his insert screen would be like the tiniest, like most postage stamp sized thing to where you couldn't even see him.
That's right.
I was like, what's the point of this? And he became a hell of a manager, though.
Oh, he was great. I got to see him live in '95. He was really great. He was one of the, Memphis. People dismiss it after a while, but '95 was so great because of people like Billy Jack Haynes, the Smoky Mountain Feud, and Brandon Baxter was all over that TV, and he was dynamic. He was great.
And Scott Bowden started. When did Scott Bowden start? 95.
Oh no, that was before then. Yeah,
but then he came back, didn't he?
I don't remember.
I think so.
If he was there at that time.
But I think he came. I think he was around later too. Yeah.
Well, anyway, those are our follow-ups from last week, and the next thing we want to talk about is obviously this week was the passing of Iron Mike Sharpe, longtime wrestler. Unfortunately, a lot of people just think of him as a job guy, but maybe the most entertaining job guy ever. And that wasn't his whole career. I mean, obviously, he wrestled different places in Canada, and if you really think about him in the early 80s, he was in Florida in 82. He was in Mid-South in 82. While he was in Mid-South, he went and did the world-class Christmas Star Wars, where he teamed with a fake Ben Sharpe. And
real Mike Sharpe Jr. and fake Ben Sharpe Jr., as I think we discussed a few weeks ago.
And who was the third partner in that team?
Oh, who was Tom Steele?
Tom Steele.
There was a Kaniski was one of them, right?
Kelly Kaniski was one of them, yes.
But I don't remember if he was Ben Sharpe or Tom Steele.
And they wrestled against Terry Gordy, Buddy Roberts, and David Von Erich filling in for Michael Hayes. And won the
filling in for Buddy Roberts.
Oh, wait, was that what it was?
Yeah, Hayes still wrestled, and then Buddy Roberts was unable to get to the show.
Oh, you're right. I'm a fool.
And then he tells Michael, I trust you to help me with my brothers like this, and I'm helping you with your brothers.
That's right. So, he was there. He had a Georgia face run in 1980. He was in Memphis in 85. People forget that he was in Memphis with Eddie Gilbert. He was aligned with that whole Eddie Gilbert, Jimmy Hart stable with Randy Savage as well. And then he was in WWF where, for the most part, he was, a preliminary guy on television. There were periods where he got brief pushes, like in 83. I remember he got a little bit of a push. He had, I think, a heel versus heel match with Don Morocco at MSG at one point in there. And, there was a Piper's Pit. Do you remember the Piper's Pit with Iron Mike Sharpe?
Not necessarily.
He had the black wrapping on his arm before Ace Cowboy Bob Orton had his arm.
Yeah, I was going to say, did they compare notes?
They did. They didn't. It was before Ace was there, but they were going to have Mike Sharpe break boards with his arm, but he ended up pulling out. But bringing out the boards, they go, Roddy Piper goes, here are my producers bringing out the boards. And one of them's, Mel Phillips. Coincidentally enough, the next one's like a young boy. And then the third person, maybe one of his only WWF television appearances, was Al DeRusha.
Huh.
Yeah, he runs out there to bring the boards out as Roddy Piper's producer. And, so Iron Mike was getting a little bit of attention there. But, for the most part, he was just, he never got wins, but he was the most entertaining jobber. He was loud. He screamed a lot. And, fans liked to call him a wimp. And, one of the things I was thinking about when I heard about his passing, Bix, I'd love to get your opinions on it, is, he was a guy, he ended up having a training school in New Jersey, trained guys like Nova and a lot of the guys who were part of the Dennis Coralluzzo crew of Jersey independent guys like Devin Storm, I believe. And, I saw him, he was still doing jobs for WWF in 93, maybe even 94. And by that point, there were enough fans in on it so that, like, when he was doing, and hitting people, the fans would be making the noises with him. Is he someone that ECW could have done something with in 94, 95?
No.
You don't think so?
I mean, maybe as like a Hack Myers type figure.
As some kind of figure. I feel like, he would have gotten over if used correctly. And I think Paul Heyman would have been a perfect person to take him and figure out a way to use him with that crowd. Because that is the crowd that would have reacted to him.
Yeah, I'm thinking like Hack Myers because of like, the whole
Shaw.
Yeah, and like that maybe him kick them going along with like a my arm type of thing.
Right.
And
right.
Well, I mean, he was noisy with everything, but yeah.
Of course, known as a world-class germaphobe. He would shower over and over again at the shows, and I've read it was the Spectrum or the Boston Gardens where he was actually locked into the building because he was showering so far after everyone else had left, including the janitor.
I mean, it sounds like he had straight up OCD. No,
that's all you can say. Yeah, when you're showering 5 times a day for an hour at a pop, that's straight up OCD, man. And,
yeah,
I think one of the coolest things I remember him doing was, remember in '88, him and Bad News Brown had a thing.
No,
didn't they have a thing? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because I only remember bits and pieces of it, where him and Bad News Brown teamed a few times, and then they started like fighting each other. Because I remember seeing a clip on like an old Coliseum video of him and Bad News Brown like brawling to the back.
I don't remember this. No.
Yeah, now we have to go back and find it. It just popped into my head. I seem to recall it happened. Bad News Brown and Iron Mike Sharpe. So, Bix, what thoughts do you have about Iron Mike Sharpe?
I honestly don't know. I mean, he was definitely a better worker than he got credit for. I mean, he was not like a great worker, but he could be very good. I mean, he had that really good match with Tito Santana at the Garden. Is probably the one that would stick out the most. Was pretty good in other territories when I saw him. I wish I could have seen more of him in Calgary because it seems like that was maybe one of his better runs. I'm trying to remember what exactly he did in Mid-South. I feel like I've seen more of the Memphis than the Mid-South, but I think I've seen the Mid-South at some point.
Well, Steve Williams gave him credit for when he broke it into the business, really taking care of him and driving him around and teaching him a lot of things. Steve Williams, like in his book, wrote that Iron Mike Sharpe was like one of his best friends in Mid-South in '82.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it sounds like he became a pretty decent trainer later on, too, so that doesn't really surprise me. I mean, who did he train? He trained Nova, right?
Trained Nova. I think he trained Devin Storm. I feel like there's a bunch of those guys from that era of Jersey independents who were all trained by Mike Sharpe or were in and out of his school.
So, yeah, I mean, for as much as people like to joke about Nova, including me, that's a pretty impressive accomplishment, especially because those guys kind of laid the groundwork for the indie boom that came a few years later.
In Mid-South, one thing I know it's on YouTube because I recently watched it, there's a really cool match. It is DiBiase and Matt Bourne, the Rat Pack, who were the tag team champions, against Mike Sharpe and Mr. Olympia. Mike Sharpe was actually the babyface there, and the fans were into him. You've never seen the fans really into a babyface Mike Sharpe. That's where you could see it.
That's probably a good chance to shine because you're in with such good workers who had great chemistry with each other already.
Yeah.
Jerry Stubbs, he has to be among the most underrated guys in the history of the business.
By far. And, even it's said that he wore the mask because he was bald, but he was a great masked wrestler. And, he had a great physique. I'm surprised he didn't do more. I don't know if he was one of these guys who didn't want to really leave, other than his Mid-South run, didn't want to leave his hometown, like an Austin Idol kind of situation. But he was a really, really good worker. And, other than Mid-South and Southeastern, where did he work?
He had that run in Memphis as Fake Mass Superstar.
Oh, okay.
Which I don't think lasted long, but he was good there. I don't know why they use... I mean, other than it's Memphis and that's what they do with masked guys, but it's still a little weird to use someone like that in that role, I feel like, as opposed to like a... it's Memphis as opposed to like Tommy Gilbert or Don Bass.
Sean Baxter.
Probably not. And I mean, I was watching some '86 Continental the last couple days. His feud with Brad Armstrong is probably the best Brad Armstrong ever was.
Really, you think so?
Yeah, I think my big takeaway I love Southeastern Continental, but watching more again the last few days, my big takeaway is that there are so many guys there who just something about that territory, in the context of being in that territory, like for the guys who it was their home territory, that something about them worked better there. Like, look, Steve Armstrong, Wendell Cooley, not exactly great promos. But when they talked, they were effective there. It's hard to explain until you see it, but I feel like just all the guys there, I guess you call them the homesteaded guys, just something about it, like that they fit there in a way that they didn't necessarily fit anywhere else, even if they were still like good workers elsewhere. Like, look, was Johnny Rich ever remotely as effective outside of Continental?
Oh, of course not. Of course not.
But it's not like he's being carried by being a local guy. He's good in Continental. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
That is probably these days at least the most underrated territory, as far as looking back, I would say, too, to go along then from the thread about Mr. Olympia, Jerry Stubbs.
It is, and I think, I've been thinking a good deal about it lately, especially after I saw that Bo James had a bunch of DVDs of Southeastern, that it's one I really want to start diving into, because for many years when I was tape trading, it was really difficult to find any footage, especially any good footage, of Southeastern. Now it seems like there's more out there than ever before.
Yes, and it seems like there's not as much Continental after the name change out there as there should be. But definitely it seems like there's more Southeast. Like, I don't remember seeing the 83 stuff that's on YouTube before.
Right.
Which is I think the Bob Armstrong heel turn era.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a lot of there are similarities to Memphis, but it's still but it's very different from Memphis too.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird comparison. It's like a mix between Memphis and Smoky Mountain.
Yes, Smoky Mountain. Right, Smoky Mountain has the extra Memphis influence because it's Cornette booking. That's what he grew up on. But because of the guys who were there and whatever contributions they made to their angles and stuff, Smoky Mountain also feels a lot like Continental.
Right.
And because that's the territory they're in, to a point, at least.
So, and by the way, I'm looking online as we talk. I can't find any record anywhere of Bad News Brown and Mike Sharpe. If anyone out there remembers this, get at us, because now I'm wondering if this is some figment of my childhood imagination that I saw this.
Where were you looking on History of WWE?
I just did a Google search, Bad News Brown, Iron Mike Sharpe.
Okay.
I wanted to see what came up. So if anyone remembers anything, let us know. Let us know that I'm not crazy. But moving on, there's another anniversary this week, and it is, 45 years, Bix?
45 years.
Since Bruno Sammartino, Ivan Koloff, the famed match where Ivan Koloff defeated Bruno Sammartino, ending his long title reign, silencing the Madison Square Garden crowd, as we've been told many, many times. The only footage of it is there's, I guess, 8mm footage, and obviously there's no crowd noise on there. And I've seen two different copies of it, one with Lou Albano doing commentary, and goddamn is he awful.
I haven't seen that one.
You never saw that one?
No, it's because it was that Rocky Raymond guy who did the film, right?
I'm not sure.
I think so. It was the guy who did all those films in that era and stuff, and I think that's him, unless I'm thinking of someone else, because there was also... There was also that guy that did a couple that guy in Boston or somewhere. Where was that guy that would narrate his films? I don't know, but anyway, it was. I think Rocky Raymond is the guy because they're. He used to put ads like in Wrestling Then and Now and stuff. I think didn't he, for like a guy who was selling films. But anyway, there is a film. It's edited, well, not edited, but it's clips because of the. I think it's more than 3 minutes or whatever. I think it's more than a single reel, right? Because each reel of 8mm was like 3 minutes, right?
I'm not sure.
But it's a few minutes of the match, and that's the thing. I wish there was audio because, the whole legend of the match is that the finish happens, which is just Ivan Koloff hitting the top rope knee drop, getting the pin, the crowd going completely silent to the point that Bruno thought his eardrum popped or something.
Yeah, and, I watched the film the other day, and it may be one of the last times Bruno worked without a wig because he still had his big bald spot on top of his head.
When did he start wearing the wig?
I don't know. I mean, obviously there was the Brady Bunch perm, and then there was kind of like the Beatle mop top hairdo. I'm going to guess he started wearing it shortly after this, if he wasn't already wearing one previous to this. But it looked like he wasn't wearing it in the match from what I saw. Okay.
And I feel like he had more than one perm wig. Like he had one that was okay, and then he had one that looked like a dead animal sitting on his head.
Yeah.
Right? Because there's one that's still obviously a wig, but at least looks like hair.
Yeah.
And then there's one that's just sitting there.
Bruno, I kind of understand. Because he was on top of that territory and really, he wanted to look young and even though I thought he looked kind of cool when he finally stopped wearing the wig and just looked like a respectable older, sport, athlete.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I liked I thought he had a cool look when he had the, kind of slicked back balding thing going.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of, the current, shaved head, mustached Bruno Sammartino look. I'm not sure how this happened. But Killer Kowalski in his wig is the one I'm always fascinated with because he looked like a menacing guy before he had the wig. And then with the wig, not so much.
I'm trying to remember, because I know I've seen him pre-wig. Like, what did his hair actually look like? He
was a receding hairline, was losing his hair a little bit. But, I mean, any picture you see of him or any clip you see of him from back then, he looked kind of like a scary guy because of it. And then all of a sudden he's, Ringo Starr.
Now, have you ever seen Ace Starling without his wig?
No, it's not a wig.
It's a weave. It's a weave. I know.
Ace Starling had a weave from what I remember. Because I think Tracy Smothers accidentally ripped it out one night, right?
Someone did. I think Tracy Smothers sounds right.
And then Rod Price. Who ripped out Rod Price's? Was it Chris Adams?
Chris Adams, possibly on purpose.
Yeah, possibly.
There's video. I know there's video of that one, but I've never seen it. Apparently, it's very bloody.
And then Sean Stasiak had a hair weave, right?
Did he? I don't remember that one.
That's what I had always heard. That Sean Stasiak had a hair weave.
And of course, Stan Lane had. He's had a few. Forms of real Stan Lane.
Real Stan Lane, not fake Stan Lane.
Real Stan. Well, I don't know. I'm sure fake Stan Lane was also a wig connoisseur. I guess would these also be? Well, no, because one of them he did the headgear gimmick to keep it on, so it wouldn't have been a weave.
He wore the headgear in '92 in Smoky Mountain.
Right, so I would think that's not a weave because he did the. It was like a knockoff of the Mongolian Stomper thing, right? With the inner ear condition, wasn't it?
That was what they said. Yeah, it's weird. I never. I was a huge Midnight Express fan. I never looked at him and thought like, oh, that hair is fake or he's losing his hair. And like these,
it must have been like in the period like where he wasn't wrestling as much, where it started to go, I would think.
When I first started watching NWA in 1989, I was such a silly kid. I used to get Stan Lane and Lex Luger mixed up. Even though the physiques were radically different, I thought they looked so similar because of the hair that I used to watch and be like, oh, Lex Luger's wrestling. Oh, it's Stan Lane. I regularly got them confused for like the first 6 months of watching NWA.
Okay.
Yeah, just throwing that out there, Bix.
How
You okay over there?
I just don't understand how this is a thing. How this would be a thing too, for you. Like how could you not tell them apart?
I mean, eventually I did, but I mean, like, I would turn the channel, and my first thought would be like Lex Luger's wrestling or Stan Lane's wrestling, and it would be the other guy.
Was this one both had the bright colored trunks?
It was 89, so
okay, so that's
I think Luger and Stan were both wearing neon colors.
Okay, so maybe at first glance, it's a blonde-haired wrestler in pink or neon green or whatever. Okay, so as far back to Bruno and Koloff, I mean, I feel like it's hard for us to really understand what it felt like at the time. I mean, the comparison everyone makes now is Undertaker Lesnar.
Yeah,
which I get. I don't think there's anything else that could really come close. And it's similar reaction with the crowd.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, is there any way for anyone who wasn't around to really conceive of what that was like?
It's hard for me to believe that it happened that Georgia Macropolis wasn't like crying her eyes out in her seat, as it went down. There isn't anything else I could think of that would be comparable to what we've heard that it was like.
I mean, because who else had that long a run as a champion or anything like that?
No one.
And well, how long was Vern's big run? It was long.
Yeah. But I've never. Who did he lose it to after the big run? Bockwinkel?
I think so.
Yeah, I don't know. Is there any tape of that?
I don't know. I mean, and even though he was a bit really over babyface, he was not the worshipped figure that Bruno was in the Northeast.
And maybe he should have worn a wig.
That's an interesting thought.
Because Vern always looked older than he really was, kind of like that Dory Funk Jr.
Arn Anderson, Fujiwara.
Yeah, Fujiwara. That's right.
But I mean, I guess that makes me think about also. Do you think Bruno's a better worker than he got credit for?
Yes, because I think Bruno. It's kind of like that junkyard dog thing where, you watch him now and you're like, oh, this guy just kicks and stomps. But Bruno got the crowd into every match and everything he did. You never hear about Bruno losing a crowd.
No.
So, by definition, he's a great worker for that reason.
Absolutely.
I mean, and
but from a match quality point of view,
it's hard to say. New York, especially out of all the territories, had a different match style, a slower style.
Yeah, it was. Let's just say it. WWF wrestling was not good.
Yeah,
by and large.
By and large, it was not good. And Bruno had the fans up. He had them invested in every match and everything he did. And, it's kind of like you would hear about when Ray Stevens would choke someone or do something, he would shake his head and get his hair going and it would make the crowd go crazy. Mm-hmm. Bruno, when he would start throwing those kicks, the place would go crazy. And he would throw. If you look at him, he never does anything lightly. Bruno still to this day, I don't think can completely break kayfabe about anything. And if you look at him in the ring, you think that he's definitely taking it very, very seriously.
All those kicks and stuff looked really good.
Yeah. He wasn't doing, moonsaults, but he was, for what he needed to be, he was perfect.
Well, and also for someone who was working in a territory known kind of for loose-looking work, he really didn't have a lot of holes in what he did.
No, and he was believable because, I remember when I first became a wrestling fan and I would, older people, if they were around and I would say I'm a wrestling fan, they would right away bring up Bruno Sammartino and talk about, I know it was fake, but, Bruno was a real, they believed in him.
Right.
And, another thing you say, was he actually a good worker? I would say he was. He was actually a tremendous interview too.
Oh, yeah.
And, that was something that was never said until the last few years, but he's so believable in those interviews.
The Zbyszko feud.
The Zbyszko feud, but any interviews you ever saw him do, he's believable.
Yes. Doggone it. And also, when he wasn't working the WWF style, he was better too, overall. Like, in Japan, there was more he could do.
Yeah. Well, obviously, he was one of Giant Baba's most famous opponents from the 60s.
And the only one, though, who worked as a babyface, as far as the Americans.
I guess so. I'm trying to yeah, I guess so.
Bruno was one of the rare guys of that era who did not work as a heel, who was a foreigner who did not work as a heel in Japan. He didn't even, I mean, occasionally he might work like the kind of like roughhousing foreigner type of style, but he was never a heel.
I have an interesting question for you, Bix. 1971. If it wasn't Ivan Koloff, who would have been a good pick as a transitional WWF champion?
I mean, it seemed like they were very into Koloff as the champ. I mean, remember, he was apparently going to have a much longer run until they were like, oh, God, you're getting so much heat, you might get killed.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm trying to think who else had... Because, I mean, he had already feuded with Bruno at least once and done very well. And he had already gone to Australia and stuff. So he had become like a pretty big international star. So I'm trying to think who else.
It's interesting. Bruno to Koloff to Pedro, you know, all three in the wrestling world, relatively short guys.
Yes. You know what? That makes me... I'll ask you this because I had...
And I will answer.
I think when was this last year? Maybe that I did a podcast with. Was it maybe Dylan? Was I on Dylan Howell's and Dave Musgrave show, Wrestling Culture? I'm trying to remember. We were talking about the Hall of Fame, and I am not a big Pedro Morales Hall of Fame booster because I feel like the circumstances of his run as champion feel too much like it's the WWF machine that's drawing. That he was kind of, I mean, other than like his, you know, charisma and stuff, and his, you know, whatever, however he was on promos, he was stripped of everything he was known for before he went to that territory. You know what I mean? He was like known as this Edouard Carpentier type of high flyer everywhere else. And then he worked kind of this dumbed down, you know, WWF main eventer style. And, you know, he allegedly didn't draw as well outside the Garden and all that. But I just feel like it's, and almost to a point, Backlund, I mean, like, I'm not as sold on Backlund as some other people.
Really?
But because of that.
You think it was the machine and not him doing any of the drawing?
I just feel like it's the to a point. I feel like the circumstances are that they kind of picked this guy out of nothing who, you know, who was a good worker but kind of awkward, and then disappeared kind of his own accord, kind of not. After the whole thing, I just feel so kind of peculiar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is, you know, and look, Bob Backlund is one of the worst interviews of all time back then. But, you know, my father had a friend named, he's still alive, named Scott. And when I became a wrestling fan, Scott would talk to me about it. My father never liked wrestling, but Scott had previously liked wrestling. And he always talked about how much fun he used to have going to the Garden to see Bob Backlund and Dusty Rhodes. Mm-hmm. That he would go every month to see Bob Backlund and whenever Dusty Rhodes was there. And, you know, that's what it was. There were a large amount of people who wanted to see Bob Backlund beat someone. And while he was incredibly awkward, especially on his interviews, I actually think he's another one underrated in the ring. And especially, he was underrated in the ring in general. But if he was with a really top-notch guy, he could have an exceptional match. And again, get the fans really into it. Not just a great match in what he's doing. He was able to get the fans up and into it. And, you know, the Pedro argument is your Pedro argument for Backlund in terms of him being a draw. You know, as far as I know, Bob Backlund was drawing great, you know, all the way through. Well, in every arena.
And he was, but he did have more support than everyone else did. You know, he had more, you know,
there was an Intercontinental title.
There was the Intercontinental title. There was Snuka. There was Dusty and Andre being used more.
Well, in Snuka, you're talking 82 and 83. In Dusty, you're talking 78 and some of 79. Andre was, you know, Andre was around, but Andre was also around during the second Bruno title reign.
Yes, because he was around a lot in like 75, 76.
Yeah, because Bruno always wanted to work with Andre and Vince wouldn't let him.
That's right.
So I think Bob Backlund is a Hall of Famer, because he drew those crowds for 6 years, because it worked for 6 years. Look, the last year, you know, wasn't easy. He had changed, you know, he went, you know, the fans are already kind of, once Snuka got there, the fans were ready to turn on Backlund. And he just got more and more, you know, hokey. You know, all of a sudden he had the crew cut and he was wearing a singlet, and, you know, it was very hard for the fans who had been relating to the All-American boy to relate to him anymore. And they were ready for Snuka. They didn't realize he was killing his girlfriend and beating her up and everything. They wanted to have Snuka as the top guy. So, yeah, I think you could argue that 83 was really Snuka and Morocco supporting a lot of those shows. But again, you had Backlund against Slaughter, which was a pretty big deal, you know, as a match that
and it was the second go-round for them.
That's right. And in terms of Pedro, but I think Backlund's a Hall of Famer. In terms of Pedro, you know, it's a tough one. Obviously, he was a star in Los Angeles beforehand. And after the WWF title run, until he came back for the Intercontinental title, he wasn't really a major player anywhere. Am I right?
No, he was like a mid-carder or less in
for Crockett.
Crockett.
And where else? I'm not even sure where else did he work during that time. Puerto Rico?
Puerto Rico. Did he go back to Los Angeles at all?
I don't know.
I just feel like, I mean, yeah, the Backlund thing's a little weirder because of the way he just kind of quit wrestling and all that. But I feel like Pedro, you have a guy who became a draw by dumbing himself down. I mean, look, it's not that that the high-flying high spots are everything, but it's just that, you know, the WWF wrestling, as we said, was not that good, and you have a guy who changes style completely to become not that good, and he becomes a draw in the process, and he's not as good a promo as Bruno or as charismatic as, I mean, you know, and not that that's, you know, not that everyone is, but it's
different because Pedro was speaking to a different audience, and it worked spectacularly to that audience.
But it did not work as well away from that audience.
Right, but it wasn't like the house is tanked.
No.
He didn't meet Bruno levels. Well, let's be honest.
But they did also kind of beg Bruno to come back.
They did, but who do you think they could have put in a Bruno position after Bruno that would have maintained Bruno business?
I mean, I don't know. I would go that far, but if they're going with the whole ethnic draw strategy, they probably should have gone with someone that wasn't as New York specific. In that, this is not like now where you have this giant Hispanic demographic everywhere. Then it was more, the whole thing about New York and Puerto Ricans and blah, blah, blah. I don't know, though.
But who? I mean,
yeah, I don't know.
You couldn't really do that to Jay Strongbow. He wouldn't have been good for that role. I don't know who else there really is to put in there. And, in terms of Pedro, and you talk about Backlund having great support, Pedro in Morocco was a big thing.
Yes.
In 81 when he came back for the Intercontinental title.
Yes. Although, it's weird. Like, he's like almost feels like one of those exceptions, though, in the, how for years and years people talk about how, like, I guess you would say when I don't even know when you'd say it stopped or whatever. The whole idea of the IC title being like the workers' title. He was kind of one of the exceptions, but then because otherwise, it's like Patterson, Patera, Morocco, Tito, Savage, Valentine, Steamboat, and you have Honky Tonk Man and Warrior.
Honky Tonk may be the exception. It took a little bit of
Warrior.
Yeah, it took a little bit of a break until Perfect.
But then you have except for Rude, right? Yeah, and then it's Perfect. I mean, Carrie's not as good, but whatever. Then Brett, then Piper was good, and Davey and Sean, and I guess you have your breaks, but it feels like it kind of loses that specific meaning around. I guess kind of like early like Austin Attitude Era.
Well, I mean, all the titles lost their meaning around then. Well, yes. So I would say that's probably a good bet. Yeah.
But, what were you watching? By the way, the Lesnar Undertaker WrestleMania Live when it happened?
Yes, I did.
What was your reaction?
Well, I remember before it happened, I started thinking that the match was a train wreck.
Oh yeah, I mean, with hindsight, probably more due to the concussion than we realized at the time.
Yeah. But, you know, it didn't seem like, I mean, that was really the most shocking thing was the fact that he lost to Lesnar would have been shocking, but it was really shocking. Just, it happened like when the crowd just they weren't really popping for anything. It didn't seem like the time for the finish. And when it happened, I was stunned. I couldn't believe they did it. I really didn't think Undertaker would ever lose at WrestleMania. Me
too. And like, I remember thinking, watching it's like, because the thing they always did, it's been kind of a WrestleMania pattern that if you have guys repeat finishers, that the third one is usually the one that's the finish.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, like, in my head, I'm sort of thinking about that, but I'm like, oh, so I guess they're going to do that. You know what I mean? That he's going to kick out of, he's going to be the first person to kick out of like a third F5, and then he didn't. And I think obviously, though, it's an even bigger moment if you have a hot crowd in a good match, because
yes,
the change from the popping for the finish to going the false finishes, to going silent would be even bigger.
Yes.
But
I just thought it was a mistake to break the streak too, because even if you felt he was at the end of his career and he couldn't do anything again, you could always bring him back and have him do a match where he doesn't do anything, and just the streak can continue as a thing.
Yeah, I mean, Vince literally thought it was his last match.
Yeah, well, Vince thinks a lot of things that are wrong.
He wasn't necessarily wrong to think that, though, I don't think. I mean, look at just how messed up he's been by some of these matches and all that. Like, I totally get why he did it. I mean, and Lesnar it seemed weird in the moment, but then with what they did with Lesnar and the title and stuff, I think it worked out great. And they totally rehabbed him from, jobbing him too much and all that. Like, he became exactly what he should have been when he came in.
Yeah. Instead of jobbing to Cena right away.
Right. Which is an incredible match.
But a stupid ending.
But the finish itself, I feel like, was executed well, even though it shouldn't have happened.
But that's what I'm saying. It shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
I don't care about the execution. I care about the result.
Yes.
So, yeah, Bruno Koloff. Managed by Captain Lou. So that gave Captain Lou his World Heavyweight Champion.
Yes. And that was also, but he had just started to be managed by Captain Lou, I believe, because he had been managed by Tony Angelo before. And the idea was that Captain Lou was like now the secret sauce to him being able to become the world champion. Was he Captain Lou yet, or just Lou Albano? I don't know. That's a good question. He may not have been the captain yet. That's a very, very good question. So I guess now it's time to move on to our Dennis of the Week. Oh, Dennis of the Week. This week we got a fun bunch of stuff. So I remembered in 1999, I filmed a bunch of stuff. I brought a video camera down and filmed a few shows. And I just found the tape and converted it, and I just uploaded the clips to YouTube. There's 3 different clips I put up. One of them is 45 minutes, and if you invest your time in it, it'll pay off because it's fun. And then the other 2 are quick. The one that we're going to talk about first, that's quick, and actually we're going to insert the audio from it in here so you could listen to it, and then you can go watch it, was from November of 1999. Dennis gives a locker room speech. The locker room's filled with the typical New Jersey workers, as well as John Cronus, the Pitbulls, the Public Enemy, Big Dick Dudley, Ryan Shamrock, Nicole Bass. I'm trying to think if there are any other names now. Gilbert. And Dennis is upset because the previous week's show, Rick Ratchet, I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe Rick Ratchet was in the ring, and the referee told him to go to the finish, and Rick Ratchet said, "Fuck Coralluzzo, I'm getting heat." Now, Rick had a great relationship with the Coralluzzo, so it wasn't like any sort of like putting down Dennis. It was more that he felt he had something going with the match. That same night, Twiggy Ramirez, who was a really underrated worker, if you watch some footage of him, he was really good. He had a manager, Madonna Wayne Gacy, who got on the mic and said something, maybe it was shit or ass, or maybe he was one of the people. There was a time where I felt like people were getting on the mic and calling Gino Moore a chubby virgin. But he said something and then broke the mic. And what he said offended the priest who was at the show and several parents. And, no one wants to field complaints from that. So the tape we're about to play for you. And if you want to watch it on YouTube, you could just look for Dennis Coralluzzo locker room speech. And it'll be linked in the post, I'm sure. That's right. But if you just put Dennis locker room, it may come up.
And this is Dennis going off to all the people in the locker room about what had happened and what he expects to happen going forward.
Cool bass. Yo, come on in. Anthony. Yes. All right, do your meeting later. Come on.
He's got cottons.
All right, let's talk about the business a little bit here before I get started. All right. What I want to say is, I've known Teddy here about 18 years. All right. I've known Johnny. See, the guys, Teddy and Johnny and Cronus and where's Dick Elliott? Is he back here yet? He's getting. He's bring him back. Pit bulls. Bring him. Wait for Dick Elliott to get back here first. Where's he at? Someone get him, please. Big Dick. Yeah. Yeah. There you get him. What's that? Where the hell's he at?
Oh, brother.
Don't stiff me tonight. Alright, well, forget what we, but now, let's go back, let's talk about some of these guys, like, and even like Nicole Bass, she's new, and Ryan Shamrock, and Dwayne Gill. See, the thing is this, these guys I talk to a lot, and there's no difference in your ability and theirs. It's just they paid their dues, they got great ability, and the one thing they done, which no one else, a lot of people fail to do, is listen to who's paying the fucking checks. Okay? Now, when I have to do with Teddy, I was using him as an example because I've been with so long, I don't have to tell him to do anything. I don't even have to ask him. We have an understanding because we respect each other, and that's why these guys have been on TV, and they've been with the WWF and WCW and ECW.
Extremely crappy.
Yeah, well anyway, they know that if they listen to the guy that pays the money, and they own everything's fine. Okay, they're good people, just like a lot of yous are. And I'm not directing this toward all of yous, but some of yous. From now on, from this fucking point on, stay off the fucking microphone and stick to your times. I'm not going to fucking go out to a referee and tell him, hey, these guys are 4 minutes over, take it home. And he tells the fucking ref, fuck Coralluzzo, we're getting heat. Because you guys are only fucking these guys, because you know why? They're the guys that draw the fucking money. They're the guys that put that old lady and the mom and dad and the kids' asses in the seats, and you're fucking them and pissing on them when you take your fucking 8 minutes match and turn it into a half-hour fucking WrestleMania Broadway. Okay? And then they gotta go out there and do 3 fucking minutes with a fuck finish. So from now on, stick to the fucking times, stay off the fucking microphone. If I don't tell you to go on the microphone, after you go off the microphone, grab your gear and get the fuck out of here. You ain't getting paid and you're done. I fucking had it, and I'm not putting up with it after tonight. Okay? We had a microphone busted last week. I fucking suspended a guy and fined him for doing nothing different than anybody. I mean, he just had a fucking attack of Alzheimer's or something, because he's been working for a long fucking time, and I don't know why he got on. I didn't think it was too bad what he said, but I tell you to stay off the fucking microphone because he offended the priest, parents, and I'm tired of hearing shit from Dapper, and I'm tired of hearing shit from sponsors and parents, how fucking guys are getting on the mic and saying shit that they don't agree with, okay? So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to stand by the fucking door, and I'm going to give you the time. You go over the fucking time too much, I'm coming out and ringing the bell, and just fucking leave.
So we'll deal with that.
Right, just don't have to handle everything. I just tell you what, I fucking had it. I mean, you know, we always had a good working relationship. And I always fucking,
Sammy the Bull!
yeah, no, I mean, I always take care of I'm friends with a lot of these guys. Shut up. A lot of these, yeah, come on, Gary. A lot of these, I just fucking had it, man. It's ridiculous. The show last week, these guys are getting in the ring at fucking 10:30 when the show starts 7:30 because everybody wants to do fucking WrestleMania. Okay, you guys are supposed to, it's like a fucking, an orchestra, you're supposed to build up to the fucking last song. And you aren't doing that. You're fucking killing it. And that's what these guys are here for. That's what we pay the money to these guys for. That's why these guys put asses in seats. And these guys eventually are going to do that too. But for now, fucking listen to me, okay? It's the last time I'm talking about it. You don't throw the fucking microphone, don't get on the microphone. If Donnie wants somebody to get on the microphone, me and him will talk about it, and we'll let you know. Stay off the goddamn mic and stick to the times. It's getting ridiculous. All right? Any questions? Donnie, any questions? Go over that one more time, please. All right, one last thing. Like I said, I'm not directing these comments at everybody. And I felt bad with having the Madonna last week, but we got to draw the line somewhere, and we got to start doing shit the right way. And thank you all for your time, and There's no reason really to get on it. I mean,
Well, I said ass last week on the mic.
Say fuck. See, the microbe's going to hold it. They want to come and see Dick Dudley get in the ring and kick somebody's ass. They don't want to come and see Dick Dudley get on the microphone. You know what I'm saying? I'm not being a jerk on them, but they want to see, they want to see Teddy and Johnny in the ring. They want to see the Pitbulls. They want to see Gilbert come out to the ring and do his fucking gimmick. They don't want him getting on the mic. You know what I mean? And plus, everybody's trying to do promos. And it's only added an extra 45 minutes to the fucking show. At the end of the night, instead of seeing Public Enemy against you and Cronus and being excited about it, they're yelling boring, because they've been fucked up the ass for 3 hours. You know what I'm saying? All right, thanks.
What away with words.
Thank you very much.
Who's you tonight? I'm juicing anyways. It don't matter. Bleeding all over the priest and everybody.
So that was Dennis doing his locker room speech, and I mentioned that I brought my video camera down there and filmed a bunch of things. Now, I put them all online, so you could watch that video and you could watch 2 others. One of them is I titled it the Lupus Ladder Incident. The wrestler Lupus was in a 3-way match. We had talked about it previously here on the show.
On the first show, yeah, and this is the whole match.
This is the whole match. It's Lupus versus Kevin Knight versus Twiggy Ramirez, and I mentioned Twiggy was a really good worker. Watch this match. He's really, really good. And it's a ladder match for the NWA 2000 Heavyweight Championship in Vineland, New Jersey. And during the match, Lupus climbs the ladder and is prepared to dive onto his 2 opponents on the floor. And the ladder gives way, he slips, and he goes head first straight down. So the finish comes rather quickly, and then I cut the camera and we all went off. He got helicoptered and we all went to the hospital to meet him there at the trauma unit. But a pretty good match, and then just a horrible ending. And I still to this day don't know what happened to Lupus. Hopefully he's out there and well, and if he is and he's listening, I send him my best. He was always a good guy. I had a lot of fun with him. Another cool thing in that match, and in the notes, I timestamped it so you can go look at that, is manager Al Getz, excuse me.
Al Dukes from Opie.
I don't know why I just thought of Dukes, but Al, because he's the Duke of New York. Duke of New York, Al Getz. Alan Barry. He's managing at ringside. He manages Twiggy Ramirez because, again, Madonna Wayne Gacy was suspended for the previous week getting on the mic, cursing and breaking the mic. And a fan in the front row, for some reason, is just very invested in this match and throws a karate kick to the face of Al Dukes, who, excuse me, I did it again. Al Getz. And Al Getz, doesn't even flinch. But watch carefully, and you see this fan throw a karate kick at him. And then the other thing I put up is entitled The Saga of Sex Appeal. And this is 45 minutes, and this is something that we used to watch regularly after I filmed it, and we really loved it. And it started where there was a show Dennis did, and there were some big names on it. Iron Sheik, I think, may have been there, and a lot of the people you see on this show, Public Enemy, Cronus, Pitbulls. And so I don't remember who the trainer was, but some wrestling trainer was there with a few of his students.
Gino Caruso?
And, I really just don't remember who. I was trying to remember. It could have even been Kevin Knight. I'm not sure who it was. And the students, for the most part, were, the way you would be in a locker room. Humble, nice, respectful. And one of them stood out because he was, when everyone else would shake your hand and keep their head down and say hello, he would start cutting promos on you. Right away. As soon as he got in the locker room, let me tell you, Iron Sheik, you know who I had sex with last night? Your mother. Just crazy.
But he wasn't doing it maliciously. He was doing it thinking he would pop them.
He was doing it thinking that's what you're supposed to do.
Okay.
And he gave me a tape of his promo. And the tape, the video I put up there, the Saga of Sex Appeal, starts with the tape. And I tell the story. I actually put a bunch of text into the video to tell the story so everyone out there could understand what's going on. He gave us this tape of his promo, which he had been practicing over and over and over again, which, as you will see in the video, because he repeats it. And then he showed up again the next week. And this week, we were going to put him in a battle royal, let him have a match. And he starts cutting his promos in the locker room, so we film him. Me and Mark Carluzzo, Dennis's son, a really great friend of mine, we say, okay, do your promo for us. And Jim Kettner, the famed promoter from Delaware, what was it, ECWA?
ECWA, which still exists, but now I believe it's Mike Tartaglia that took it over.
I believe so. I think Kettner left in like 2010 or something.
Yeah.
Sold it. But he had been a longtime promoter, and he was a really, really good friend of Dennis.
Not as long time as he said he was. 1967
Right.
1967,
he said, yeah. But
which he sort of at times has admitted was that actually just like when he started backyard wrestling, he's like sort of cryptic about it, but sort of admits it, but sort of doesn't. It's weird. But go ahead.
Yeah. But so Jim Kettner was there, and he decided to come in the room. Jim Kettner was a really good friend of Dennis's. He was around a lot at that time. There were a lot of times where we'd be hanging out at Dennis's place. It would be me, Mark, his Dennis's son, Dennis Jr., Jim Kettner, various other people. And he wanted to see what this kid was all about, because we had told him about this kid came into the locker room and started cutting promos on everyone. We had never seen anything like it. And he starts cutting his promo, and then for some reason in the middle of the promo, he just decides to turn on Kettner. And I think he calls him cross-eyed. And Jim did not even flinch. And me and Mark were laughing because it was hysterical, but we were both thinking, I think Kettner may be actually mad right now. And the kid kept going. And then Kettner just yells, I didn't fucking appreciate it, and walks out of the room. And now the kid, Sex Appeal, and we changed his name. His name was Sex Appeal Mikey Steele. And Mark Coralluzzo changed his name to Sex Appeal Ronnie Steele.
Which is a better name.
Oh, there's not enough Ronnies in wrestling. I'll tell you, it's just such a great name. And we ended up talking to Kettner off camera, and I asked him, and he like winked at us and let us know that he was fucking with the kid. He was playing a rib. And eventually Dennis comes in there and yells at him that Jim Kettner is Vince McMahon's right-hand man, and he better go apologize and make up for it, which he does. And then he goes right back to his promos and insulting everyone in the locker room. So now he gets in a battle royal. And there are people who can't wait to get a hold of him in this battle royal and chop him, because no one behaves like this in the locker room. None of the longtime wrestlers, none of the new wrestlers. So he gets in a battle royal. I decide I'm going to enter the battle royal too. So I had a hockey mask for some reason in my car. I put the hockey mask on, and I got to be one of the many Jason the Terribles in wrestling. And I enter the battle royal filled with just so many no names, a few well-known Jersey independent guys, and just guys I've never heard of or seen ever since. And I get in there, I throw a few chops at him. One of the chops I hit him with, I hit him so hard my hand went numb. And right when that happened, I turned to Slayer.
I have a question, though. Had you been shown how to throw a proper chop?
No.
Okay.
I watch Ric Flair videos.
Because one of the things you hear now is like that there's a difference between a chop and a slap, and you don't have to know how to throw a chop properly.
Oh, no. Like Quentin Tarantino once said, I didn't go to film school, I went to films. I watched Ric Flair videos. So I threw a chop, my hand went numb. When that happened, I turned to Slayer and Father Osborne, and I said, throw me out. And they dumped me out. I was in and out real quick. And then Sex Appeal stayed in there, and just guys were chopping him, and Rocco Dorsey at one point kicks him in the head, and then he takes a nasty fall out of the ring. And as he's going back to the locker room, he's still Sex Appeal. He's yelling at the fans. He gets in the locker room, starts cutting his promo again about all the jabronis in the locker room, shows his chest, which is bright red, and that's the end of it.
Now,
and
was this the one where he takes the bump onto Mr. Fred, or was that the next one?
Why do you keep calling him Mr. Fred?
Because that was his name in 01 when he was the evil NWA referee. He was Mr. Fred in Japan.
Oh, I didn't know that. No, I just knew Fred Rubenstein, and his gimmick name was Fred Richards, and he had been a referee for Dennis, and it turned out he had actually, I believe he was stationed in West Texas, and he had been a referee for the Funks in the late 60s.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, and he had done, if you look at any old ring wrestling magazines from the late 60s, or maybe even the mid 60s, the West Texas results are sent in by him. He's the one who sent in the results for the shows he was working on.
Huh, okay. And, so wait, so was it this Battle Royal or the other one that had the bump?
That was the first one that was the first one.
And it did not go well. I don't know. I couldn't tell if he was supposed to fall onto him, though.
I don't remember him falling on him. I think he fell into a kid in the front row. He just takes a really nasty fall.
No, he takes a bump onto one of the refs. So, and if you said it was, I think
that was Fred. That was Fred, yes. That was absolutely Fred. Yeah. So, and then the next week he returns. And before the show, he said he wanted to show me his new finishing maneuver called the Sex Appealer.
Which is this? Okay, this is my favorite part of the video, by the way.
I tell him that the name of the Sex Appeal is a horrible name, so he decides he's going to call it the Hand Job. And Sex Appeal Ronnie Steele gets in the ring, trying to demonstrate on Lupus this maneuver. Lupus is not having any of it. The maneuver is he's on the top rope and he gets snapmared off the top rope. But when he lands, he snapmares the guy who snapmared him. If it doesn't sound like it makes much sense, you have to see it to understand.
Well, and it's also because it doesn't.
What a bad idea it is. Yeah, it's a really bad idea. It's a really, really bad idea. So Lupus isn't having any of it. And, then sex.
Could you imagine if he went along with it? He would have had his accident.
He would have been.
What was this?
A day.
Yeah, a day or
the day before. It was the day before the ladder match accident. So then eventually someone who he knew, the great Sorrenzio, comes in the ring and tries to do it with him. And it's not pretty. It doesn't even make any sense. Lupus at one point is standing next to me and doing commentary. And he's like, what the hell? Like, no one's ever seen this move before. So then we go back in the locker room. And again, Sex Appeal's cutting his promos on everyone. At one point, he goes up to Ryan Shamrock and Nicole Bass and this girl, Lisa, who had been Miss NWA. And he calls them his hoe train, which, gets Ryan Shamrock's facial expressions during the whole thing are hysterical.
Isn't she like eating a bag of chips too?
Yep. She's eating a bag of chips and just reacting without saying a word to everything Sex Appeal Ronnie Steele is saying. Later on, we do another promo with him in the hallway. He had wanted to do something with Biggie Biggs, so Biggie played along. And as Biggie Biggs is like, pretending to beat him up, Nicole Bass walks by and you just hear her go, "You guys are so immature." Walk out of the room. So we do the Battle Royal again this week. And now I decide I'm going to enter again. And Mark Coralluzzo enters with me. Mark Coralluzzo puts on a mask and calls himself the Silver Bullet. I put on a mask and call myself Bombkratz, the Chop Master. And the reason I use the name Bombkratz is I had mentioned a few weeks ago on the Dennis of the Week a prank that Dennis and Mark had pulled where they sent this fan, Dave Bombkratz, into a room filled with Shane McMahon and Vince McMahon and Jim Cornette and Jim Ross and Bruce Pritchard and whoever else was involved with the production meeting to bring them sodas. Go back, listen to a few weeks ago, and actually I talk about it this week on the Jim Cornette Experience. Well, this fan, Dennis, earlier in this tape, at the beginning of the tape, presents with the NWA Fan of the Year. We just did this for fun. There was no NWA Fan of the Year website poll, which is what Dennis says, and Dennis gives him a picture of him and Mil Mascaras. So I decide I'm going to name myself after him. Now I get in there, Mark gets in there, and now there's just a lineup of people who want to get a hold of Sex Appeal. I gave my video camera to Ricky O, and I said, film this match, we're going to be in there. And his mouth is watering watching us in the ring. Eventually you hear him say, "Is it too late for me to enter?" And he gives the camera to someone else. Next thing you know, he's in the ring chopping Sex Appeal. So you see some of that, and then we go back to the locker room, and once again, it's just the total Sex Appeal show. So if you want to, it's a fun video. You get to see a lot of the inner workings of NWA New Jersey in late 1999. And like I said, there are 3 videos up there. There is the Dennis locker room speech, the Lupus ladder match incident, and then the saga of Sex Appeal, which hopefully you get a kick out of.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned this to you, I think last night, that in a weird way, Sex Appeal Ronnie Steele reminded me of a man named The Prince from it's those Women's Championship Wrestling home videos, which I think were the NWF here in the Northeast, right?
I don't know.
I think it was. I think that's what that was.
I haven't seen too much of that. So
No, me neither. But I think that's what that was. That it was women's matches from the who promoted that? Because I know Rob Russell was involved, but he wasn't the promoter. Anyway, The Prince. I first became aware of this. There's this video of like, I don't remember what's described. With inappropriate wrestling promos or something like that, and my friend Tom Green, not that Tom Green, had excerpted it and put on YouTube. And it's also, besides sort of seeming like Sex Appeal Ronnie Steele, he also kind of seems like this proto Larry Sweeney. And he does this promo where, let's see what you have to see the whole thing to believe it, and I'll make sure we link it or put it in the playlist or whatever. Calls the Spina Montages a bull dyke. What else? He calls Boogaloo Brown, who I guess was a manager. What does he say? Like a jive spider monkey or something like that.
Yes.
A jive spider monkey.
Exactly what it said.
What else? He cut the. I think my favorite part though was when he's cutting the promo on Debbie Combs, and refers to Cora Combs as that Valium addicted mother of yours.
You know, there's so much of that weird 80s racism whenever you watch old tapes. And I was watching the other day an episode of Championship Wrestling, WWF Championship Wrestling from 1985, and Mr. Fuji and Don Morocco were doing an interview, and they were calling the Junkyard Dog, Fuji said it, a yard ape. And I was just like, wow. You know,
I've never even heard that one. I know. Wait, no, I think I have, actually. No, I think I have heard yard ape, now that I think about it, unfortunately.
Fuji calls him a yard ape. And I'm just like, Jesus Christ, that's just so strong. It's amazing more wrestlers weren't assassinated by African-American fans for just some of the racist stuff they would say.
And then on top of all that, too, the Prince, I try to remember exactly what he says, but he talks about the things he's good at while making a V sign with his fingers and sticking his tongue out. It's certainly unlike
Championship Wrestling.
Yeah, it's certainly unlike any other promotion you've seen from the 80s. And he managed Locke and Luna Vachon, and the former Winona Littleheart, I believe, is who that was. And
yes, I think so.
A very, very interesting promo. And but yeah, check out Sex Appeal, Ronnie Steele. It's worth the
saga of Sex Appeal.
Yes, it's worth devoting your time to. I believe, I don't know. Did you? I guess you'll have timestamps in the description of the video by the time this is up.
Yes, the video is up now, but I'm going to do some timestamps later on today so people can navigate around, although the whole thing is pretty funny.
Right. The nice thing about YouTube is when you put that in the description, it actually, you can just click on it and it jumps right to it. So that's the good. Although one of the other videos you posted, because you mentioned 605 Super Podcast, if 605 gets linked and then if you click on it, it goes to the 605 mark of the video.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I noticed that, I think, with either the Jim Cornette or the...
I think because it happened with all of them. Yeah. So, yes. And I guess this kind of... We can transition to something that kind of follows up on last week. And also, I mean, it kind of seems like one of the reasons you kind of wanted to dig into the Ronnie Steele thing is, you know, last week we talked about the Hangman, Bruce Poe bands, and we talked about various kind of fakes and wannabes in wrestling, and... Bo James, of course, contacted us on Twitter and started pointing us to things he had uploaded to YouTube a few years ago. Where do we start with this?
Well, I guess Bo hit me up, and me and him have been having a conversation, and I think I mentioned Sex Appeal, and he said, oh, that's nothing. I used to get all these crazy audition tapes all the time. And I put a few on YouTube, and then he sent me the link. And I think the one we have to start with is the man who calls himself Godbold, Godbold. And there are two Godbold videos, one from 93, one from 97. The first one from 93 is, I don't know if extraordinary is the right word. It is this guy, and it's like really bad, video camera slow-mo of him working out. And I've been in gyms my whole life. I don't think this guy had any idea what he was doing in the gym. And so you're watching him lift weights in slow motion.
What?
And then, what? Bix?
He also kind of has this physique that looks almost like he's on the gas, but has never worked out or eaten right in his life.
I don't think he's on the gas.
I'm not saying he's on the gas, but he has this very kind of, he looks oddly composed for his shape. Does that make any sense?
No.
Okay.
I'm not
saying I don't even know what I'm saying.
Well, Godbold does his exercise video, and you should all watch it because it's ridiculous. And then he does a promo, and he's in front of some backdrop where he's written his name in what looks like silver marker. It looks just so cheap. And Godbold's doing this interview. It's like, imagine an interview by the Ultimate Warrior in an echo chamber. And that's what it is. The reverb is turned up through the roof, and this guy's just like like scream, like doing his like this Ultimate Warrior interview.
But he looks like this. It's like he looks like more like this weird like Rock and Roll Express mark.
Yeah, it's exactly what he looks like. I can't even tell you how much I enjoy these videos when Bo sent them to me.
It's very, and then the second one
from '97.
It starts frozen with him narrating, saying, "Here's another promo," something like that. From video from this one's from 1997. Only slower and more drawn out than that. There's another promo video from 1997, something like that. And this one, now he has Warrior face paint, kind of, yes. Except it's would lopsided be the best word to use here?
I think this guy's whole life was lopsided.
Oh,
according to Bo, the guy never even wrestled. He would just send Bo these videos, and it's not like he was he was a student or he had ever done anything. He'd never even been in a ring.
Well, it seemed like that was a pattern with a lot of the videos that he was sent. Not just from God Bold. That you'd have guys who would just think you got into wrestling by making a promo, by cutting a promo and sending it to a promoter, and then you just wrestled.
Yeah. I mean, Dennis had a bunch of these too. I remember one, I wish I could find it. He gave it to me. It was like these three really fat guys, and they were all wearing like tank tops, and they all had Ultimate Warrior face paint. And they were, just doing a promo about something. And it was just so ridiculous. One of the other ones Bo sent was this guy, and these are all on YouTube, Cesare, the Idol Maker. And this video is extraordinary in its cheapness and silliness. But then in the comments, Cesare starts going back and forth with Bo.
In all caps.
In all caps.
Yeah.
He accuses Bo. Let's see.
I have it open. Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah. But this guy that posted this was in his Huggy 16 years ago. Don't understand after all these years why he's ripping me. Yeah, I don't even know him. I was taught respect your bros and sisters in the biz no matter what. Why the heat now? And Bo wrote...
Well, I gotta say first, where does he think he got the tape?
Well, Bo wrote, 16 years ago, I was doing what I do now, wrestling for a living and promoting towns. Oh... This is amazing.
But where does he think? Does he not think Bo is a wrestler promoter that he sent the tape to? Like,
I mean that's the thing. Bo got the tape from the guy, and then the guy's like, who are you? And Bo's YouTube name is King of Kingsport with a picture of Bo. So I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out where who posted it.
Yeah, he also claims that
it's like when you posted. It's like when you posted the bar mitzvah story, and Vince Russo commented, like, get rid of that guy. He's awful. And you're like, I'm the one who posted the video.
Yeah. Now, Cesare claims that this was shot in a hallway at Adrian Street's wrestling school. Now, one thing also that's common to these videos, I mean, in different ways, Godbold only mentions name national star wrestlers like Hogan and Warrior and Flair.
Yes. Flair.
Cesare does not name any wrestlers.
Nope. He's looking to manage someone, and he's holding just this really cheap looking
belt,
kind of like Intercontinental belt-ish looking, and
wearing a black hat. I'd call it a cowboy hat, but I'm not sure exactly. It's more like, is it a cowboy hat? What's the type of hat that Billy Black used to wear? That type of hat.
Yeah, that kind of hat.
I don't know what you call it, though.
Here he is writing it all in caps. I was a manager, not a wrestler.
And all these guys, none of them send video of them wrestling or anything, or even trying to wrestle. I mean, there's another video on here.
Whoa, hold on. Let me read this.
What?
On the upside, I had a great time working and meeting people. Worked with SECW Orlando, ICW Daytona, EWF Indiana. Did many 9/11 charity shows at the time. Rest in peace. Laugh out loud with Rico Casanova and Tony Rumble Memorial Show and Rest in Peace. Many shows up Connecticut and Massachusetts also. Then went back to my original job, a roadie for many rock bands. Kiss, Aerosmith, Poison, etc. Managing guests. It was just a hobby to me. But I met a lot of great people along the way and respect everyone in the biz and would not rip anyone.
Is that English? Managing guests.
I don't even know. But
he
certainly looks like he would be a roadie for Poison.
Oh, he absolutely looks like a Poison roadie type for sure. He has there are some kind of wrestling posters behind him that look like they're from local shows. So I sort of believe when he says that he's at a wrestling school. You know what I mean? Like Adrian Streets. I don't understand why he would not have any even cursory video of him in a ring.
Well, he's a manager, not a wrestler.
But still, like I think that's one of the things Bo mentioned. That it's these guys don't even send video of them in a ring, even not wrestling. On
that topic, the last video we'll talk about is Bo sent it. It's called Rock and Roll Roy Toy.
Now I'm trying to remember.
It is
did he say? How did these people get on this? Did he know how these people got on this show that they were at? Like, or was this just a show of untrained guys? Or
Bo sent me the tape and it's 3 guys in a 3-way match, and it is one of the worst matches of all time, but it's hysterical in and of itself. These guys are screwing up every move, and it just looks awful. And I wrote to Bo, I was like, that's amazing. Were they actually trained? And Bo wrote back, one of the guys, believe it or not, has been working for 20 years.
Once a year. Every other year.
Rock and Roll Roy Toy. That's what you all need to search for. And check this out.
If you've ever seen like guys who like backyard wrestlers who try and fail to do Irish whips, it's that kind of thing. Like you know how everyone that doesn't know how to wrestle that does an Irish whip looks. Everything they do looks like that. That's kind of how I'd sum it up. So that's all on Bo's YouTube channel. We'll link to some of it. I'm sure there's more stuff like this out there.
Yeah, on the topic of guys who haven't been trained and aren't very good or shouldn't be in a wrestling ring, Bix uncovered this week that for the first time in a long time, maybe ever, the Chuck Austin video is on YouTube. Bix, tell us a little bit about Chuck Austin.
Yeah, so Chuck Austin, Charles Austin, is the job guy who got partially paralyzed, had his neck broken, whatever you want to say, in the match with the Rockers at a WWF TV taping in Florida in 1990. They did the weird thing they do where they team some job guy with someone on the roster. In this case, it was Lanny Poffo, the genius, against the Rockers. He takes the rocker dropper completely wrong, jumps and lands on the top of his head, and is broken. And Jannetty turns him over. Michaels hits a kind of a splash, kind of headbutt off the top for the pin. Apparently held up the taping for like half an hour to tend to him, and he sued WWF, got a jury award of, in 1994, I believe, $26 million and change. I think it was 26.
I was gonna say 27, so that sounds about right.
But like 26 and change. I believe like a week or two after the Jesse Ventura royalties trial too, and then like a week when like I guess it was also like a couple weeks before the Vince criminal trial. So also there was no Jerry McDivitt on the case. It was a different lawyer because McDivitt was preparing with Laura Bravetti for Vince's defense. And as we'll get into, his story was interesting. I mean, the real notable part is that it actually has the clip of what happened because the match never aired on TV. And I didn't realize this at first, but you pointed out to me, this is not the one that used to be floating around among tape traders years ago. This is American Journal, and the one I think we had seen was Inside Edition.
Right. The one that I had seen had Shawn Michaels being confronted on the porch of his house where he says, look, it has nothing to do with me. I was just the guy's partner, because it happened with Marty Jannetty in the ring. And also it had some other quotes from Chuck Austin at that time. So I'd never seen this ever before. Inside Edition I had seen, but not this version.
Yeah, I mean, the Inside Edition one is probably better in that it gives you a better picture of what happened. At least if you're a wrestling fan, it gives you... Well, even if you're not a fan, it kind of gives you a better picture of what happened. Because he kind of cops to how untrained he was a little more. But he sounds more... what's the best word to use? I don't know about negligent, but like he talks about how he was training guys, and he had just had a couple matches. Seems like he wasn't even really trained, and he went into this, and you know, after all this, WWF started being much more careful about where they got their job guys, and he always insisted that Jannetty told him to do a front somersault, taking the rocker dropper. Which is the completely wrong way to take the rocker dropper.
Yeah.
And he landed on his head. And that's what happened. And like, okay, look. WWE, I don't know about legally, they probably did have some responsibility in the sense they never should have had these unvetted, barely trained job guys working their shows. I don't know if that's a legal responsibility to the point, you know, whether the jury thought it was, but they shouldn't have, and they did learn from it. But, you know, whatever faults Marty Jannetty has, there's no way he told that guy to do a somersault taking the rocker dropper. He lost.
By the way, that wasn't even a somersault. He didn't even do a somersault.
Well, he tried to take a somersault, do a somersault, and landed on his head because he was taking the rocker dropper while that was happening.
The guy came there and misrepresented to them how long he'd been wrestling.
That too, yes.
And it looks like he's wearing Don Morocco's tights, but he gets in there and he took this bump exactly how you wouldn't do it. Breaks his neck. But, you know, he is certain. The fact that he got there and lied to them about his experience, and, you know, it has to be on him too, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And they had a trial, and at the trial, Bruno Sammartino was the prosecution's key, because Bruno hated Vince McMahon so much at the time, he would have done anything. Well, he would have testified anywhere.
Well, he wasn't going until apparently the story was he wasn't going until he saw the video, and he was outraged. But the thing was that WWE's key witnesses, as far as being like the expert witnesses, were Gorilla Monsoon, Killer Kowalski, and also Dean Malenko was there as the guy to take the rocker dropper safely on pads to show that it was a safe move that Austin took wrong. And the problem was, I mean, should I explain this, or do you want to explain this part of why they lost?
Go for it.
Gorilla couldn't keep from being Gorilla. And he was sort of, even though the nature of the trial, it didn't make any sense, he sort of tried to act like wrestling was all on the level. Like, you know, Muhammad Ali confronted me, and I got him up in an airplane spin, and that was the last I heard of Muhammad Ali. Kowalski, trying to help, brought up the Yukon Eric story. You know, these things do happen as accidents, and talking about how, you know, Eric didn't hold it against him or anything, but it seemed like it was like this weird bragging war story. Anyway, everyone found them sleazy. Bruno said it was a dangerous move. You know, that was probably he probably was not correct. Who knows what he even knew about the case.
I mean, other than Dean Malenko, who was brought in to take the move in the courtroom, I mean, these are all wrestlers from the 60s testifying about a move they absolutely never would have encountered. Move that wasn't even used in wrestling.
Why do you think they did that anyway? Like, they felt like what's an expert witness about wrestling going to be? An expert witness is going to be an old guy? Like, something like that? And then the plaintiff's attorneys were like, well, Dean Malenko is an experienced professional from a wrestling family. You know, that this doesn't help your case, blah, blah, blah. And it just seems like the way I'm sure it could have been a winnable case, but I guess Austin, even though he was the one that was, it's to some degree lying, it seems like.
Yeah, definitely. I think he admitted that he. Yeah,
I don't think he admitted that he lied.
He admitted that he lied about having
lied. I don't think he. No, I think that wasn't. I don't think that got admitted into the case. But he never admitted to lying about what Jannetty said. I don't think.
No, I was talking about the fact that
he had lying about his experience. Yeah. But it seems like it was just the whole that WWE came off sleazy, and they believed Austin because they had these two conflicting stories, and they chose to believe Austin because WWE coming off sleazy, and they won. And WWE appealed the award. I don't know about the verdict, at least the award. And in '99, there was some kind of settlement.
But anyway, I think we're about at time right now.
Yes, I think so.
Why don't you get your plugs in?
Well, I already did one of them. Right. We peeked at, or you refused to. You didn't even want to peek at the article now that it's gone up because you were worried you could just get absorbed. But I've seen it now. It actually is laid out great. They did a phenomenal job with all the art and stuff. And that, of course, again, is up at sbnation.com/longform. I can't remember if the new Fighting Spirit is out today as this goes out or next week. I think it's out today. Either way, it has both me interviewing Tom Pritchard in the training ground section as well as my WWE op-ed, which I think I mentioned last week. More Hogan Gawker stuff in Figure 4, of course, because this week there was the hearing and the motion to dismiss and all sorts of stuff, and a lot of, if you've been following this, it's pretty interesting stuff. I know some people haven't been enjoying it, but if you've been keeping up with it at all, this is more good stuff, especially that it's Gawker ironing out every way that they feel that Hogan and his lawyers have lied so far, which, if you're into the whole Hogan, mythology, lying, bad memory stuff, then I think you'll find that interesting, and I guess that's... Oh, no! Between the Sheets, sorry. I'm just a little discombobulated today. Between the Sheets this week...
You need to just make a list of all the things you need to plug.
I was going to, and then I forgot.
Every week you forget what you have to plug.
I do. There's too much. Plus, I was focusing on the Big Show thing. But yeah, this week's Between the Sheets, we cover 20 years ago this week, 1996, with our friend Pete Schirmacher from Titans of Wrestling and all that good stuff. And I guess that's about it. Also got some stuff up on SE Scoops. And yeah, I guess that is it for now. Yeah, I got to make a list and just read from it. I'm being too sloppy. But I guess you already got your plug done too, so I guess that's it.
Yeah, listen to me this week on the Jim Cornette Experience, and otherwise, I'm out.
Yeah, MLWradio.com. Go there or look it up on iTunes and all that good stuff. But yeah, I guess that's it for this week. So follow me on Twitter at David Bix. Follow Brian on Twitter at GreatBrianLast. But until next time,
Tellio!
Let's listen to Mark Goulin.
Let me tell you something, Bill Dundee, you egomaniac. You think that you're a superstar, and you claim to be a legend in your own time, but you have made a fatal mistake when you crossed the house of Goulin. T-Joe Khan will meet you in the ring anytime, any place, anywhere, and you will pay with much pain and suffering. No one will recognize you when the mighty Khan is finished with you.
Oh, yeah, superstar, Bill Dundee, T-Joe Khan, another of the great bouts that are going to be on there. Remember, $5 and $3, Wednesday night, Evansville Coliseum. What a night of championship wrestling action it'll be. Hope you're going to be right there with us.